Hey there folks, this is GreenyXI welcoming you right back to Let's Play Higurashi. This is episode 198. In the last episode, there was a bit of a falling out between Satoko and Rika. So they ended up in the school infirmary, and the new doctor, Rika, ended up confiding in him, telling him everything about her witchy time loopiness, and obviously he pretended to understand, thinking she was nuts. So, let's get cracking. Rika-chan, do you have a moment? After school, as I was about to head home before the rain started up again, Satoshi called out to me. I looked up and saw Mion and Reina with him. I'd been stopped by the upperclassmen brigade. Their expressions weren't exactly gentle ones, and I suspected I was in for some sort of punishment after what I did during lunch break. Do you need something from me? Yeah. I wanted to talk to you a little about lunch break. Well, that too. I'm sorry for hitting Sadako with the chair and stuff. I spoke the words fine, but didn't bother to hide my glum attitude. Please don't be scared, Rika-chan. We're not here to scold you or anything like that. Then why are you? I'll say it straight. We need to talk about how to get along with everyone from now on. It's just... I just want you to understand something. Some of the responsibility for things ending up this way belongs to you, Rika-chan. Mion, you didn't have to say that. I think it's an upperclassman's duty to explain these things. Isn't it? This conversation didn't look like it would be a fun one. If I blew them off, it would probably only get worse, so I decided to just pretend I was listening. Reina took my silence for me being dispirited, and she started speaking in a much more light-hearted tone. Rika-chan, don't you think it'd be great if you could make friends with everyone and have lots of fun playing with them? So we were thinking. We were thinking about what we could do so you could get along with everybody. What do you think about that? What do you? I don't know. You may not know this, Rika-chan, but Mion, she collects a lot of games, right? Well, it's an old hobby of mine. When I was little, I collected a ton of board games and card games for some reason. Oh, we know. I haven't bothered with them at all recently, but I couldn't just get rid of them, so I have the whole lot piled up in storage. She has all these fun games, but she won't play them with anyone, so just collecting dust. What a waste, right? I want to play that British burglar game where the thief puts on sunglasses. What's that? I want to try the game where you connect tree branches like building blocks. What's that? But all the manuals are in English. That Shion, reading these manuals was the only good thing she was good at. We could just ask her, but she goes to another school far away. Then we should all try to figure them out together. I'm sure that'll be fun. That's true. If we all play by the same rules, then even if we're wrong, it'll still be fair. Well, doesn't that sound fun? We're thinking about starting an after-school game club. Here it comes. A club? For games? Everyone in class can play. And while you're playing with everyone, I'm sure you'll eventually become part of their circle before you know it, Rika-chan. In other words, this is your upperclassman being considerate and giving you the chance to fit in. Again, Mion, you don't have to say it like that. I felt a little sorry for you lately, but I actually think some of your current isolation is your own fault, Rika-chan. My own fault? Reina and Satoshi fell silent after hearing that. I guess everyone in class shares Mion's opinion. My own fault? Of course, though this was about me, I had no idea what they meant by that. They were talking about the Rika Furude before I came. To me, she was the same as a stranger. But to them, it must have seemed like my surprised tone was just me not understanding because I was young. They sighed a little. It was an unpleasant sigh, like they were telling me to look at myself. I wanted to be freed from this as soon as possible. Before everyone moved away, Rika-chan, you were kind of like a princess, weren't you? I was... a princess? Yeah, a princess. Rika-chan, you were like a princess to that group of boys. You had them wrapped around your little finger. You didn't even need to do anything, you just let them act for you. Do you remember Tomita-kun and Okamura-kun? They seemed to like you a lot, so they do whatever you told them to. You just sat on your reputation, unconcerned. And you do things like make the boys who liked you compete, so you could always get the best deal, like a war profiteer. A lot of kids didn't think that was very fair. So when those boys all moved out at the same time, by coincidence, and only you were left behind, some of those kids thought you got what you deserved. None of that was about me. Rika-chan, we're talking about you. Please listen to what Mi-chan is saying. I am. No, you're not. Rika-chan, you think it doesn't have anything to do with you? Am I right? Or rather Rena or Reina, she was still just as sharp about the weirdest things. I wanted to believe it was just a wild guess, but she had hit the nail right on the head. Reina, you stop too. I think Rika-chan has thought about it enough already. I wonder. She still hasn't said so. It seems to me like she didn't realise it until we told her. Come on, stop it. We're not here to bully Rika-chan. We really wanted to be friends with everyone, right? That means we all have to work hard to change our relationships with each other. For some reason I was upset. Because it was as though they weren't talking about Rika Furude, but about me. Me, a princess. There was no guarantee I wasn't one until now. Loved the most of all the club members, Rena and the boys in the class pampering me, laughing at Satoko and Kaiichi's failures as I coolly profited from their conflict. Without giving anything myself, I just greedily devoured the goodwill people poured upon me. They were right, that was me. I hadn't wanted to accept this sad, lonely world, and set myself apart. But of course, they couldn't have actually been talking about me. So though I didn't know the reason, I was still upset. We were thinking of having Satoko join the club too. She's really stubborn, so she won't say it, but she wants to get along with you, Rika-chan. Does she? How'd that sound? Do you want to try being in our game club, Rika-chan? I'm sure it'll be a lot of fun. Or, think of it this way. Do you want to start putting in a little bit of effort to change yourself? Some things might be awkward at first, but I'm sure you'll get along with everyone sooner or later. After all, everyone wants to be your friend. And if you want to be their friend too, then you're both reaching out your hands. I'm sure you'll meet in the middle. And look, we're already reaching out to you. All you have to do is grab hold, Rika-chan. I felt like Kaiichi said something a lot like that in some other world. Those words probably made Rika Furude really happy. But that wasn't me. All this only applied to the Rika Furude from before I possessed this body. For me, this world was fake, a dream world, and besides, I was in the middle of a hunt. I didn't have time to hang out with them. But they weren't faking their feelings for Rika Furude, and I found myself without an answer, at a loss for how to respond to them. We're sorry, Rika-chan. To tell the truth, when we went to wash our hands and you were talking with Yamamoto-sensei in the nurse's office, we might have overheard you a tiny bit. Reina gave me an apologetic look. I never thought others would be listening to that conversation, which must have sounded like garbled nonsense to anyone from this world. I'd understand if it weirded them out and they didn't want to come near me, but I couldn't quite understand why it had resulted in this. The world you were talking about, Rika-chan, it sounds like a really fun world where everyone gets along together. You said you wanted to go back there, right, Rika-chan? So we talked and thought about how we could bring you back there. Still, it's not like we can call back Tomita-kun and Okamura-kun now that they moved. Yep. I think everyone wants to go back to that old world, but I think that's definitely impossible. Huh? That startled me. There was no way Reina knew about me and my old world. Even still, her words felt full of meaning, and they echoed in my heart. You can gather all the fragments of the cup together, but they're just fragments. Once it breaks, it can't go back to the way it was. But there's more than one cup. It's a shame the cup broke, but you can always look for another one. But if you look down at the broken cup forever, you'll never ever find it. Here's what we mean, Rika-chan. You can't get your good friends who moved away to come back here. So you just have to make new friends who are just as good as they were. I think a world like that would be really close to the one you came from, Rika-chan. It wouldn't be exactly the same, of course, but I think it's as close as you're gonna get. And by doing that, you can make even stronger relationships than you had before. You know what they say, when it rains, the ground gets harder. Or something like that, anyway. What do you think, Rika-chan? We'll help out, so you can make new friends quickly. Would you like to give it a try? Those gentle words would have been tear-worthy if they'd been said to this world's Rika Frude. But now that I had possessed her, she was gone. The Rika Frude they were talking to was no longer of this world. I thought to myself that I should just give this body back to her. If I did, the me living in this remote parallel universe would have the chance to change her fate and make this world a happy one, if only little by little. If I went back to my old world and gave this leftover body back to Rika Frude, but I couldn't do that, because for me to leave this world would require the same method as returning the fragment from this world to the world of the gods. In other words, my death. Only my death could make me go away, which meant at the point I took over for Rika Frude, she was the same as dead. But maybe, just maybe, there was one way to return this body to Rika Frude. How? That would be for me to die a different way. I wasn't a parasite or anything. In difficult to understand terms, I was an individual personality aware of other universes. Or maybe I should call myself a memory aware of other universes. And that meant that if I could forget about the other worlds, that would represent the same thing as me dying. This world was the only world for Rika Frude, and she would live the best she could in it. If so, I would gradually forget, eventually losing my grasp on which world I had lived in, and try my hardest to live in the world I was in now. Which meant that giving up on my previous world and living in this one was possible simply if I decided to do it. Like Raina said, it might be a different world than my old one, but it was the closest I could ever get. It might be a little different from my old world, but the club would still form. In exchange for Keiichi and half our classmates, Satoshi was there. I wasn't best friends with Sadako, but depending on how we interacted in the future, we could at least become regular friends. Hinamazawa would sink underwater in another 6 months, but I could work hard to make new friends in my new home. That cruel destiny wasn't for Rika Frude's alone. It was an impartial destiny, shared equally by all who lived in this world. Only I had the luxury of being a special case and jumping between destinies at a whim. I didn't know. Which world should I devote myself to? Reina's words came back to me. A broken cup never went back to normal, and I couldn't find another one as long as I was lamenting the first. What did the cup represent? Cups were for filling with water. The water could probably be called happiness. The cup broke and the happiness inside was scattered everywhere. The cup was broken and I was at a loss, unable to fill it with happiness again. But if I could change the way I thought, and rather than be attached to the broken cup forever, fill a new cup with new happiness, it could open the door to a new world. Still, while that world might be similar, it wouldn't be the same. My heart had weakened, and I'd been discouraged. Wasn't this only so tempting because my search for the key to go back was so difficult? Because didn't I swear I'd put in any effort I needed to return to my old world? If I broke that oath, Hanyu, gambling on my fate, would be left behind for all eternity, all alone, and I'd be the only one so selfishly happy. While I didn't have any responsibility to make Hanyu happy, she was my ally and partner who stuck with me for 100 years. So even if I wanted to give in to temptation, I'd have to ask Hanyu. Which meant, right now, I had no right to answer the proposal. Really, thank you. I'm very happy. It's alright. We'll protect you. So let's make lots of good memories before we have to leave. No, well... Could you give me time to prepare my feelings? What? What's with that girlish response all of a sudden? It's not like Satoshi just asked you out on a date or anything. Mi-chan, that wasn't necessary. I can understand how she feels, just a little. So we'll wait for you to prepare your feelings, Rika-chan. Thank you. If I do accept, then please, let this Rika Frude be one of your friends. I bowed apologetically. Here and now, that was the most I could do. After refusing the suggestion that we all go home together, I left on my own. It was Rika Frude's right, not mine, to enjoy going home with them. It wasn't something I, Frederica Bernkastel, could accept. What was I, anyway? I wondered if another ball could fly into my head like before. That was how this world's Rika Frude was possessed by me. So if it got hit again, would I vanish, and the pure Rika Frude who lives in this world return? If only I wasn't me, I wouldn't hesitate to take them up on their offer. This world truly was far sadder than the one I'd come from. but this world had something all its own, and the opportunity to become a happy world in its own right. If I hadn't known about the other worlds, I wouldn't have been able to contain tears of joy at the mere premonition of happiness I might once again attain. Were these conflicting emotions those of this world's Rika sleeping inside of me? Those emotions made me angry, and I blamed myself, asking why I'd put their offer on hold and went home all alone. I'm back. Welcome home. My mother always immediately followed that up with a, "Do you have homework?" But not today. "Rika, come into the kitchen." Her voice was vaguely cheerful and light. I wondered what it was. Did she want to surprise me in a good way? But I couldn't remember today being special. A person's expectations sometimes come out in their voice. For the time being, it felt okay to go poke my head in. I set down my things and headed for the kitchen. When I entered, my mother had already started on dinner, despite it being so early. She was in a good mood. I wonder if something nice happened. Every year at this time, with the Higurashi festival approaching, she usually got more and more impatient with all the preparations and setup. Knowing all that, my mother's good mood baffled and confused me. I asked if she needed something. When I did, she suggested something I'd never heard even once in these 100 years. "Come over here and help me make dinner. We're having curry today. Let's make something wonderful and surprise your father with it." I didn't like curry that much, but before these 100 years, meaning not me, but Rika, I think she might have liked it. I knew at least that my mother was trying to make her daughter happy in suggesting she and Rika, not I, make dinner together. I didn't like my mother that much. She was prone to hysterics, and I hated how she always sounded like she was hunting you down when she talked. When she treated me so nicely, my reason for disliking her felt irrational. Wondering why my mother had had a change of heart, I decided to go along with it so as not to hurt her feelings. "Then you can peel the potatoes. Can you do it with a knife?" "Actually, that's dangerous. Use the peeler instead." Okay. I was actually rather good with a knife. I was so good that when I peeled daikon radishes, I could make a long strip of skin at the same time I sliced them. But there was no reason to damage my mother's pride by showing that her daughter could use knives better than her. I decided to make her look good for now. My mother had probably been using knives for a decade now, but I'd been using them for many decades. There was an order of magnitudes difference between us. So I wanted to be proud of using a knife better than my mother. I wanted to brag about it, but that might have trampled over her feelings, her want to teach her daughter how to use a knife. Parents are supposed to live longer than their children, so children respect the things their parents have learned from having lived longer than them. But witches like me live longer than their parents and learn many more things. Still, I think I probably never learned what I really needed to. I mean, as long as I genuinely listened to my mother, she'd never get hysterical. If I didn't feel like respecting her as my senior in life, she wouldn't feel like she needed to act as one, either. In the end, all that was left was a cold, uncomfortable relationship between parent and child. If I'd acted more like a daughter and pretended to be an ignorant child when I needed to be, maybe my relationship with her would have been more peaceful, like this. Basically, she was Rika mother. Not the mother of the witch who'd lived for 100 years. Thinking about it made it seem obvious she'd be cold to me. So first we put the ones in the pot that take the longest to cook. Okay. When do we put in the onions? The onions will melt if we cook them too long, so we can leave them for last. You worked so hard on cutting the onions too. I'm sure they'll taste delicious. Okay. My mother smiled. She seemed very happy. Her smile was warm. I thought I'd completely forgotten over these 100 years, but I remembered, for less than a moment in time. My parents had to die in 1981. That fate was unchangeable. And besides, we could never get along in the first place, so it didn't matter if they died. As thoughts like those overlapped, maybe my concern with my parents had waned. Our hearts had steadily lost their connection, and the situation had steadily worsened. Before now, I hadn't thought I could gain anything from this world. Not once did I think it would make me realise something like that. With a mother like this, maybe spending time with her would be warm. It would be fun. That's right. The reason I rejected my mother's warmth, maybe it was because I wanted to soften the sadness I felt at her death. If I couldn't change the fate she met in 1981, then she might as well hate me. Was that the idea at the root of it all? In this world, my mother hadn't died in 1981. She would stay here for a long time to come, I felt just a little jealous of Rika Furude, and I was stricken with the desire to return this world's me to her. This world was so different than my previous one. Keiichi wasn't here, Shion wasn't here, Hanyu wasn't here, but in exchange, Satoshi and my parents were here. There was no club, but there would be one soon. Satoko wasn't my best friend, but she could be in the future. I could weigh my previous world and this one on the scales, but I wouldn't know which way it would tip. I decided to leave this decision up to Hanyu. Yes, my destiny wasn't mine alone. It was Hanyu's destiny too. Whichever I chose, I would have to talk to Hanyu before making my final decision. This multiple world concept was something I only had because Hanyu had lent me her power. If Hanyu had never given it to me, it would have been over from the very start. Takano would have sliced open my belly, and that would have been it. We put the lid on the curry, so now it just had to simmer. My father returned in the meantime, and really enjoyed seeing us making curry together. Then at my mother's suggestion, he set the table. In any normal 1981, he really hated it when my mother told him to do anything. But he wasn't troubled at all at the prospect of this world. Rika, put the rice on everyone's plates, please. Can you do that? Yep, I can. Of course, I can do that, idiot. It's something I'd thought many times before, but this time I didn't. I opened the warm, steaming rice cooker and plated the rice. My mother brought the piping hot curry pot over and split it among everyone's plates. Wow, that's good. Rika served the rice, and Mom made the curry. It looks delicious. Oh, that isn't right. You made the curry with me, while your father did nothing. Meep. I peeled myself back. Furude Rika shouted that I wasn't needed, so I pulled back. I withdrew inside Rika Furude, and she got to enjoy a family dinner from the bottom of her heart. When we saw the crooked potatoes, we all laughed pleasantly. I would never cut potatoes to be so ugly. But Rika Furude was still bad at this, so these things happened. When I used the same ingredients, the only thing curry tasted like was the curry powder from the store. After 100 years with the same curry powder, it tasted the same, no matter how you made it, but this particular curry tasted different. I cried at what Rika Furude had lost. No, at what I had lost. Rika Furude got to experience the warmth she had once forgotten. I wondered if another ball would come flying and hit me in the head. Then it would pass out for a while, and upon waking again, I would be gone. Wasn't that the best possible happy ending? I was the stranger here. I thought this universe was a strange one from out of all the other parallel universes, but it was me. I was the stranger. Then what had that world been, the one I had reached after 100 years? Was this happiness that we'd all won, Keiichi, Rena, Mion, Satoko, Shion, and I, was it all worth nothing? That wasn't true. It was a radiant world, one we'd all won the right to live in after 100 years of learning to trust in each other. It was replete with a different kind of happiness than this one. Both shone brightly, and neither was better or worse than the other. Maybe in the end, most worlds weren't better or worse than any other. I only lived in the extreme worlds, the ones where I struggled to see whether Takano killed me or not. So out of all the infinite universes, I started to think of them as either right or wrong. But the multiverse wasn't simple enough to think of it in binaries like that. Tomorrow's dinner might be steak or salted soy. Soiree? It wasn't about which was right and which was wrong. In both of those worlds, I'd spend a happy time eating dinner with family. What if my respective selves had been reversed during tonight's dinner? But that was an incredibly tasteless thing to ask. The real problem wasn't that big to begin with. Neither my last world nor this world was better than the other. I needed to accept that. I still didn't know where the fragment I needed to return to my world was. But what if I never knew, and the power of the crystal ball connecting me to Hanyu disappeared? I would disappear like the stranger I was, and give this body back to Rika Furude. From her point of view, she would have to say that I had returned to my old world. Just as I once called this world a daydream, for Rika Furude, my old world was the real daydream. Her strange delusions of me would simply disappear along with it. Maybe it didn't really matter how to return to my original world. Which world would I decide was the original? Maybe that was really all this was about. After we finished eating, we cleaned up our places and started washing things. My father said he had a meeting tonight, and he was about to leave again. Rika, could you wash these for me? I have something to talk with Dad about, so please do the rest. Okay. I responded cheerfully as Rika Furude, but I had realised something slightly out of place. If she had something to talk to my father about, there were plenty of chances during dinner. But she made me wash the dishes, so they could talk amongst themselves. Rika just had to stay put and wash the dishes. But I couldn't suppress the curiosity that was welling up, and so snuck over to the front door to listen in on what my parents were saying. My mother was the one talking. Her tone of voice wasn't a cheery one. Yamamoto-sensei is discussing it with a big hospital in the city. From what he said, it might be her heart more than the brain. Apparently there's a wonderful doctor there who can help. I knew it. I knew I shouldn't have asked. Yamamoto certainly hadn't promised to keep our discussion in the nurse's office to himself. As soon as I left, he'd probably called my parents, and told them their daughter was ranting about nonsense. He probably explained it as my isolation at school wearing down on my mind and damaging my heart. Considering what I told him, even that would be a conscientious interpretation. Did you talk to Rika about it? I will after this. I mean, it feels like we're tricking her, given that tomorrow the doctor will be here and will suddenly be off to the hospital. But you know, when I think about how she feels, I can understand. Her friends got up and moved away, leaving her all alone. I should have tried to understand her feelings. Rika's always been saying she didn't want to move. We didn't wait for her to deal with that, and we made her repress it. When is Yamamoto-sensei coming tomorrow? He said this evening, but he didn't give me an exact time. The evening. He said he'd prefer it if you were there too. I'll be in the assembly hall tomorrow, so when he gets here, give me a call. Alright. Don't be discouraged. I understand why she's saying she wants to go back to her original world, but there's nothing we can do anymore. This was decided between the village and the national government. I at least want to give her some fun things to look back on when she remembers living in Hinazawa. You're right. It's time, so I'll get going. I'll leave. Rika to you. Alright. Come back safely. I snuck back into the kitchen the same as I'd come, but I think the floorboards must have creaked. When my mother returned to the kitchen, she still didn't sound particularly cheerful. You listening, Rika? Yamamoto-sensei called us today. He told us what he talked to him about. Meep. Yamamoto's really mean for talking about it without asking me. Rika, I'm sorry. You wanted to live in this village forever, didn't you? We never thought about your feelings. I think we said a lot of pretty harsh things to you. It's okay. It doesn't really bother me. My mother's apology was meant to be heard by the Rika Furude living in this world. It wasn't for me to accept, so I denied it. But my mother kept apologising anyway. I was gonna deny it again, but I stopped. It wasn't my turn. I should pull back. And then I thought I felt myself begin to fade out. As I did, I felt my eyes grow warm. The rest was for me, a misty, hazy world. I cried as I buried my face in my mother's chest. And my mother cried as well, as she hugged me. If I could have disappeared like that, this too might have been Rika Furude's life. After that, my mother told a lot of stories of Hinazawa, as if to reminisce about her own childhood. About what she was like as a kid, what she did, and where. About things happening or not happening. As she talked, we comforted each other, both of us wanting our beloved village to stay in our hearts forever. And when your mom was little, all the elderly people in the village treated me like I was really important. That was because they believed I was the reincarnation of Oyashiro-sama. Oyashiro-sama's reincarnation? I've never told you, have I? There's no legend in the Furude family. If there are 8 first children in a row who are girls, that 8th girl is said to be the reincarnation of Oyashiro-sama. That girl happened to be me. Not me? You're our first child, and a girl, but you would be the 9th. You have a maternal line, I suppose. Your mom's the 8th. Oyashiro-sama's reincarnation. But this is a secret, okay? We have to make sure not to tell anyone about it. The only ones who know are your late grandmother, me, and you. It's a secret between the two of us, okay? Sometimes, as proof of trust between girls, they revealed secrets to one another. For my mother, this was probably a trivial secret that she could use for that reason. But for me, it was different. Hanyu was first able to appear before the 8th of 8 consecutive generations of girls, before Oyashiro-sama's reincarnation. But in this world, Rika Furude wasn't the 8th. She wasn't Oyashiro-sama's reincarnation. So, in this world, Hanyu couldn't appear before Rika Furude. And that was when, with my face buried in my mother's chest, I felt a warmth. No, a literal heat. Does she have a fever? No. This felt the same as Hanyu's power. And this was a secret. With my grandmother dead, there was only one who knew my mother was Oyashiro-sama's reincarnation, the woman herself. Which meant if my mother was gone, the fragment of there already being a reincarnation of Oyashiro-sama in this world would disappear. When warm tears ceased to flow, and I felt my eyes drying up as I plummeted to the bottom of the abyss of despair. It was her. Mom had the fragment in her. If I could have, I would have chosen never to remember what that fact entailed. So the one she has to kill to go back to her real world is her mother. That's interesting, because I feel like, didn't she put her hand on her head earlier in the arc and there was nothing? But now that she knows, now that Rika knows, maybe that sort of changed things. Ooh, achievement. The 9th girl. Discover the solution. Okay, so we're going to end things off there. This has been Greeny XI. Hope you've enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you again in a bit when we carry on, see what Rika does with this information. Will she go to clubs, or will she stay in this world? Keep her mother, who she's starting to like more, it seems. Or is she going to kill her mother and try and go back to the real world? We'll have to wait and see. Thanks again for watching, folks. See you again in a bit.